Okay, folks, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome, everybody. My name is Derek Lalone. I'm one of the Model Schools coordinators here at the Mohawk Regional Information Center. And today what we're going to be talking about is how to kind of use GoGuardian in this remote learning environment that we find ourselves in, and some different ways that we can leverage the product as we're moving forward. This is one of our more kind of targeted webinars where a lot of you may or may not have GoGuardian, depending on your district, but if you do have GoGuardian, started the basics. For a few things to go over here before we get started. For those of you that joined the webinar session this morning, this will be kind of more the same, but these are our upcoming webinar sessions for this week. So we will have tomorrow morning is a live Q&A session. So essentially you guys will be able to come to YouTube, pop in your comments, anything you want to know, and there'll be kind of a panel of us online to be able to field those questions. Reaching your students through Google Meet. So we're just going to touch on some of the best practices when using Google Meet. As folks are kind of getting used to using it, we're going to move forward with, okay, now that we know how to use it, how do we do it to leverage our instruction? Smart learning solution online. So for those of you that are have used a lot with the Smartboard and the Smart Learning Suites, we're going to be doing a presentation on that. Jamboard. So Google Jamboard is essentially almost like a virtual Smartboard that's tied to the Google accounts that you have the ability to use and share with your students. On Thursday, we have tools for creating instructional videos. So again, as we find ourselves in this remote learning environment, we need different ways to kind of create our content. So we're going to be going over some tools and some best practices. And then Thursday in the afternoon, Freckle Learning. So for those of you, for the districts that have purchased Freckle and are using it in the classroom, we'll be doing a session on that. And then Friday, this is one of the big ones, I feel, is the top 10 Google tips to save your sanity. So that's one of those things where we're starting to talk about best practices of Google as we're moving forward in remote learning. And then finally, to round off our Friday is another live Q&A with a panel of Model Schools coordinators, so you can ask us questions. So with that, I'm going to jump out of the presentation here, and we are going to get started. As always, everyone, if you haven't done so already, if you leave your name in the chat, that's how we take attendance. So just go ahead and pop in your name down there, and we'll be able to take attendance for everything that we're going over today. So to get started, if you've never logged into GoGuardian before, we're going to go out to GoGuardian.com. And that's this link that pops up right here. And once we get to this screen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to select sign in. And what we're going to do here is, if you've never logged into this before, we're actually going to come in and we're going to use our Google credentials to log into the platform here. So I'm going to select login with Google. And it's going to take a minute here. Oh, and since I've already logged in, it kind of pushed me right through. The first thing that you'll notice, this is our admin console. So this is what the administrators in your district see. You can see we just have a couple users in our instance, so there's not any real data to kind of go through. But what you're going to see as a teacher is when you log into GoGuardian, is you're going to see something that looks very similar to this. So it looks very Google Classroom-esque as far as the content. And what we can do is, if I want to add students to my classroom, and one of the great things about GoGuardian is that it allows us to kind of monitor what our students are doing on their Chromebooks at home. So we can kind of see if they're on task or not, what content that they're looking at, and you kind of get a bird's eye view of what's going on while they're in either a in-person session or a live session with you. So to kind of walk you through the adding the classroom portion, if you've never done that before, over here on the right-hand side, very similar to the way Google's laid out, I'm going to select Add Classroom. And I'm just going to call this Test. And I can select a subject. I can select a description. Scenes we're going to talk a little bit about later, but we also have the ability here to add, a classroom tile color, so I can come in and add a nice yellow color. Now, the two options that we have for adding our students to a GoGuardian classroom is this. If I select Add Classroom right here, what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to upload a CSV file, add my student by email address, or it's going to give them a join code. So they go out to GoGuardian, I think /join or a hyperlink like that, type in the letters in GoGuardian, and they'll be added to the classroom. The other way that we can do it is down here at the bottom of the screen. If I select Add Google Classroom, I can go into my already existing classrooms and directly import my rosters into GoGuardian to get started. So I can come into here on any one of these. Oop, I just have to reconnect my Google account quickly here. Bear with me. There we go. So now I can come in and I can use the classrooms that I already haven't used. So you can see I've already imported these 3 courses down here. If I select this MORIC webinar course, it'll go in and you can see there's only 1 student enrolled, but at the same time, it enrolled my student and I'm ready to go with GoGuardian. To kind of go through the other way that we can do it is if I select Add Classroom, I'll call this one Test 2. And if we repeated the same process, but instead of doing Google Classroom, I selected Add Classroom, you can see that these are the 3 different types of classrooms that we can create. So right in the middle here, and I'm just going to zoom in on this a little bit so you can see it. There we go. So we have your students enroll via class link. You can add their emails individually, or you can upload a CSV file with their student email addresses. So however you want to do it, that's how you would go in and set up your classroom and get your students added. So once that's all set, what we can do is I'm going to click back on my classrooms here to get back out. And now what we have the ability to do within our Google Classrooms, and for the purposes of remote learning, I think everything I'm about to show you, I would kind of recommend against for right now anyway. What we want to do is, because our schedules are kind of so fluid right now, we don't want to actually create and schedule specific sessions. We want to be able to come in, start a session when we want to, and end it when we want to, just because we're going to talk a little bit about why in a few minutes. But what we have the ability to do here is, let's say on this MORIC webinar classroom right here, if I select the settings tab, what I have the ability to do is, as a classroom teacher, I can come in and I can add a schedule. So if every day, first period, I want this classroom to activate, my students are automatically enrolled, I can see everything that they're doing. And then once that classroom's done, the period schedule will be over, and then we'll move on to the next class. I can do that. Like I said, for the purposes of remote learning, because we have so many different people out there on so many different schedules, and I'm not sure if every district's following a period schedule, instead of going in and actually creating our schedule from here, what I recommend everybody do is, if we go right to our classrooms, and in this case, I'll select my GoGuardian example, and in this case, I already have a session started, so I can go to session, or I can go in and I can start a session. So basically what that is I log into GoGuardian. I told my students to meet at this particular time. I can go in, I can set go to session, and it'll pull up my classroom. So if I select go to session here, what you'll see is all of the students that are enrolled in my classroom, and they're all going to pop up here. Now, I only have 1 student logged in right now, and I bet you can guess which one it is. It's right over here where it says GoGuardian student number 2. And what you're going to see is, if nobody's connected to this Google Classroom, everybody's going to show up as offline. What's nice about this is, in this case, I can now go in and exclude those students that aren't available in my session. So I can come in, I can select all of my offline students, and when I do that, I get a little prompt that pops up at the bottom of the screen. I can force them to open new tab, lock device, unlock device. But what I want to do in this case is I want to exclude them from this session, because I don't want to see all those empty spaces out there. So I'm going to go ahead and select yes, exclude students. And I'm just going to exclude these 2 too, just so we have continuity. So basically what that means is, because I've excluded them, that essentially means that they're not going to show up in any of the reporting that happens after the fact. So What this means now is I'm inside my GoGuardian classroom. I can now see all of the activity that my students are doing. And I'm going to zoom right in on this guy a little bit so we can see what's going on. But you can see I have this student's machine pulled up, and you can see I have it pulled up right here. So I'm going to switch back over here quick. There we go. So on this Chromebook here, I have it open on YouTube. And you can see in this space here that YouTube is what's pulled up in my prompt. So we know that it's actually accurate what we're trying to look at. So what can we do now that we're kind of logged into GoGuardian and we can actually see our students' classrooms? So what we can do is, if I come back over here, is I can see based on the screenshot right here what page that the student's already on. But then if I scroll down here a little bit, you can see underneath, I can see the tabs that they have open. So if they have multiple tabs open and they're looking at different things, or they may or may not be on task, I can come down here and I can get a snapshot view of exactly what they're looking at and when. So I can come in here and say, okay, it looks like if I click on that link, it's going to take me right out to ESPN. So they're out on the ESPN website. And then I also popped in the moark.org site. So I can click on those buttons and it'll bring me out to that page. So that's kind of a nice piece that's built into this. Some of the other options that we have is kind of our classroom management pieces that are built into this. So what's really nice about GoGuardian is that I can do all sorts of different things. What I can do is, if I highlight my student here, and I can do that either by clicking on my online students, all my students, however, or I can just go in and individually put a checkbox in. I get this little menu that pops up at the bottom of the screen. And what that menu does, we talked about excluding before, but what I can do now is, and this is particularly good, Google Meet, or you're meeting with your students via video conference in some way, shape, or form. What I can do is I can actually guide them where I want them to go. So if I want them to go to a particular website that I'm talking about and following them, I can select this Open New Tab option here. And let's say I just want them to go to Google. I can select Open Tab. And what that's going to do is, within my student's machine, and I'm actually going to pull it up on the other side here, you can see that it reflects that it's on Google there. And on the Chromebook that I'm using, you can see it's now on Google as well. So you actually have control of the content that your students are seeing at any given time. So that's kind of a really nice feature, is that you can kind of keep them on task as you're doing that remote learning. You can just have your GoGuardian window up in the upper right-hand corner. And as you're talking, you can go in and you can kind of guide those lessons for your students and kind of keep them on task and tell them where you want them to go. Some of the other features that we have built into this, again, if I highlight my student here, I can come down and I can lock the device. So what that means is this will automatically, if the students are logged in to the Google, into their Chromebooks at home, and you send out this lock device, basically what that's going to do, it's going to lock their browser. So if you want them to listen to what you're saying or distinctly pay attention to you, I can select that lock device option. I'm just going to say look up here. And if I select lock devices, you can see that that device is now locked. And if I pull it up here in my camera view, you can see that I have this little browser popped up, and there's a little raccoon that says browsing disabled. And the message that I typed in, look up here, is set directly up on that camera, so, or on the screen, so you can you know that the message getting through to your students. So to jump back in to it here a little bit, when I'm ready, I can come in and I can select unlock my devices. And it'll allow them to get back in and kind of, keep perusing or keep looking through different resources and things like that. So that's kind of the basics as far as we're working across the bottom piece here. So we have the Open New Tab, Lock Device, Unlock Device, and exclude from session. So those are kind of the three big areas that we can do when we actually, physically click on our students. Some of the other options that we have available to us is up at the top of the screen here. What's nice is I can see how many sessions I have that are going on at any given time. So another thing that happens, and I'm going to talk a little more in depth on this later, is if I have multiple sessions going, or if I forget to close one and open another, GoGuardian will always let me know what sessions are taking place at what time. So if I need to go in and close something and end a session, so I'm not monitoring those students when they're not in my class, I can go in and kind of hit those buttons and set those things up. So with that, I just kind of wanted to point that out to you. But as we work across the tabs here down at the bottom, you can see we have our screens, timelines, and snapshots tab. So what that means is I can come in, I can select my timeline. And what's really nice about this is if I look back here quickly at my screen, I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit. You can see I have my three tabs open down here at the bottom. If I go to my timeline view, what that's going to do is that's going to give me a snapshot of how much time and when that student was on that particular tab. So I get an individual breakdown of everything that my student's doing in my classroom. And the best part about this is that it's archived. So if you need to go back in later, even if you're not necessarily paying attention in your live session, you can go in and you can look at the archive and you can see what your student was doing and for how long. So that's a really beneficial piece, especially when we're talking about remote learning, is to be able to see how on task your students are when they are in a session with you. The other piece that they have here are what are called snapshots. So the way that snapshots work are, let's say I log into, or I'm in GoGuardian and I have my snapshot up here for me. If it's something that I want to highlight, or if it's something disciplinary, so they're on a tab that they absolutely should not be on, what we can do is if I click on that screen, it'll give me kind of a breakdown of what that student is up to. So you can see here, we have our same tabs that we had. We had our open a new tab, lock device. So if I want to, I can lock that individual student's device. Or what I can do right next to this is I can take a screenshot. So if this is something that I need to, like I said, it's either to, highlight a student performance to see the work that they're doing, or if it's something, unfortunately that may be prohibited, or it's something that you need to record as evidence, I can come in, I can select that screenshot tool, and that'll take a snapshot of that desktop. So now I can come in and you can see now under snapshots, you can see the number 1 there. If I click on it, it's going to pop up that snapshot. And you can see it's going to either give me the download option, or because I'm already connected to my Google Drive, I can save right over to Google Drive. So it's a really nice additional piece that they kind of built into the platform here. Some of the other things that we can do is if I click back on that student, what you'll notice is we also had another menu pop up here, to where if I don't like that my student has these 4 extra tabs running at any given time, I can come in and I can just force close those tabs. And it'll automatically close on that student's device. So I can kind of manage, all the stuff that they have open to, ensure as best I can that they're on task, especially because I can't be right in front of them in the classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out. The other couple pieces that we have on the interface here is over here on the right-hand side. We have a chat feature built into GoGuardian. So if I select the chat button on, what you'll notice is a little bubble popped up down here in the lower right-hand corner. And if I go ahead and select that, what it'll do is it'll pull up my class list of all the students that are in my classroom. So I can go in and I can individually chat with this particular student. And that student will receive it, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. Or up here in the upper right-hand corner, there's this little megaphone. If I select that megaphone, it's going to let me send an announcement to the entire class all at once. So that's the chat feature. And really quickly, I'm going to bounce back over to my screen here, just so you can kind of see what it looks like for the student view. And it might be kind of hard to see on the camera, but you can see in the lower corner here, you can see that they have the chat icon that pops up there. And if they were to open it, you can see that their individual chat session is opened up. Now, one thing to keep in mind with that is that it is a teacher-to-student conversation only. So students cannot chat back and forth with each other. It is only a teacher-to-student communication that takes place within GoGuardian. So if I'm all set with my chat, I can go ahead and close it out here and get back on the screen. Okay. So I left my conversations open on my tab here. Let me close that out quick. There we go. Okay. So now you can see my Google chat pop back up. To turn that chat off, I just have to hit that toggle in the upper right-hand corner, and that'll take care of the chat, so it'll automatically shut it off. I also have over here what's called OffTask Alerts. So basically what this does, and it's one of those things kind of in beta, kind of not, but this is one of those things where if I have OffTask Alert set on, I can kind of generalize in these 4 key areas: English, history, math, and science. If they're on a website that's not math related, that's not English related, history or science related, it'll give me an alert letting them know that they're off task. Now, it is an algorithm that they use. So it's one of those things where it may or may not be hit or miss because it's one of those newer features, and you can see we still have a lot of subjects that haven't been added to that particular piece yet. But it's one of those things that is kind of a neat little feature built in, especially if they get the algorithm right. Then you may not even necessarily have to look at your class. You can just get the off-task alerts whenever they pop in. So go ahead and shut that off for now. But really, that's kind of the overview of the basic interface of GoGuardian. When we talk about using it in a remote classroom, it's great just because we can have that video conference piece built into it. Once we have the video conferencing built in, we'll be able to connect with our students, and then at the same time, we'll be able to kind of see if they're on task, what they're doing, or if they just turn the video camera on, hit mute, and kind of go do their own thing within Google Classroom. So that piece is nice. The one thing I am going to show you here, and I'm showing you this strictly from a how-to standpoint. When we're talking about remote learning, one of the issues that we've been having with so many districts is, for those teachers that set up that schedule. So before we went, before school was let out and students are doing home instruction, teachers scheduled their time in. So every day, first period from 8:15 to 9:15 or whatever your class schedule was, teachers were setting up their classrooms, but they were also setting up scenes. So what happens with the scene is the scene pushes out a particular rule set to your classroom. So it's one of those things where what happened was when we moved to remote learning is these teachers left their schedules in place. So every day the session started applied, and all of a sudden students were getting locked out of stuff first thing in the morning when they had no class because this GoGuardian scene was automatically triggering every single day. So when I talk about scheduling, it's great when you have a set schedule in your classroom, but when we are, like I said before, in this fluid scheduling environment, we kind of want to be aware of all the other people and all the other content that your students need to get to. But to talk about scenes just a little bit, just to give you an overview, is over here on the right-hand side. If I select Add Scene, and let's just call it Testing. Actually, let's just call it Google. So if during my session, if I only want my students to access things within Google, so Google Drive, Google Classroom, everything within that Google course suite, what I can do is I can come down into the scene and you can see in allow mode or block mode. So allow mode basically means they can get anywhere that they want to get to except these sites. So if there are places you do not want them to go to, I can pop in those hyperlinks down here and they'll be locked out of it. If I go to block mode, what that'll do is that will only allow the websites that I put in. So this little toggle switch will allow us to either give them access to everything or nothing. But in this example, what we have is we have our scene set up here. And if I scroll down a little bit, you can see GoGuardian has put together some quick lists for us. So if I came in and if I selected my G Suite and added that list, basically what that means now is when my students log into my classroom with this scene enabled, the only thing that they're going to be able to get to is their Google Suite. So that's your Google Drive, docs, sheets, slides, forms, classroom, and all the material that's kind of included in that course suite. If they try to go to ESPN, if they try to go outside to YouTube, if they try to go to any other one of those websites, it's automatically going to lock them out. But like I said before, with the situation that we're all in this remote learning, I don't recommend adding scenes just because you're adding a restriction to a student's device, where if you forget you left it on, or the class runs long, or like I said before, you have it on a schedule, those rule sets are going to apply every single time. But I did want to at least give you an overview of what it looks like at any given time. So I just want to give you a quick example of that. If I jump back into my classroom here, once I have those scenes created, what is nice is that I can manage them. So if I did want to come in and kind of ad hoc add one of these scenes to it, I can come in and select my Google Docs scene. You can see it spins around, and you can see it automatically forces them to Google Drive, and that's where they get to hang out. To turn it off, I can just go over to the toggle switch over here and select none. So that's kind of the basic of setting up those scenes, is I can go in and I can kind of create restrictions and then different things built into that. So one thing to talk about is when I'm all done within my GoGuardian classroom, I've completed my session for the day. Now, typically, if I do an ad hoc session, they'll last 45 minutes. So if I forget to hit this little end session button over here, or I neglect to do something, it'll automatically close after that 45 minutes. But if I do hit end session here, it'll cancel my session for this particular time. So I'm going to go ahead and hit end session. It's going to prompt me one more time if I want to end it. I'm going to say yes. So what it's going to do is automatically give me a little snapshot of my students that came in, or any physical snapshots that I took of that classroom, and then also my command log. So I can actually go in and have a log of everything that I pushed out, whether I turned chat on, whether I forced open tabs, whether I individually spoke to one student. It'll all be here in a log for me for whenever I need it. So if I come back and click on my classrooms here, if I go to the GoGuardian class example where I just was, you can see here's my archive session. So I can go back and visit these whenever I want. I can go in, I can select the tab, and it'll pull up that content that we just saw. So that's a really nice piece of GoGuardian, is that it'll keep a historical record of where my students were going during the times that they were in sessions with me. So one last thing I want to point out is within GoGuardian, they have added the student report piece, and I may not have enough data to run this the right way, but we're going to give it a shot here. I'm going to go to GoGuardian Student 2 and generate a report. But what you can see down here now is I can get a breakdown of that particular student, the top 5 documents that they spent time on, their top 5 Google searches in my classroom, and then it'll show me any actions that were taken against those students, any snapshots that were taken, and then also the browsing history while they were in sessions within my classroom. So it's a really nice management piece to really kind of see where your students are at, and be able to kind of monitor their content while they're in a session with you. So with that, that's kind of the rough overview of what GoGuardian has to offer districts. I'm going to come over here to the comment sections. I see a whole bunch of comments pop in here. Okay, I see Chris out there, so that's good too. Excellent. Okay, so if there's any questions out there, pop them in the comments. I know Chris is out there kind of monitoring everything. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And also, don't forget, if you want to check out our PD offerings, you can go out to morrick.org/PD, and that will take you to our My Learning Plan, so you can see all of the latest and greatest PD offerings that we have coming up while we're remote learning. And then, as always, if you want to revisit some of the other tutorials that we have set up for you, at any time you can come out and visit morrick.org/video, and that'll take you out to our YouTube channel. So if there are no other questions out there, we're going to sit online for a little while. If you have any other questions, please feel free to pop them in. And if there are no other questions, I hope everybody had a well-informed session, and I hope everybody has a good day.